welcome to our today's session. My name is Martin Wanjohi. I'd like to welcome you very much to today's session. Today, this week, we're privileged to have a panelist from Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana towards the end of the week. And today we have Memory. Memory will be able to introduce himself as we go along. This session, as you've seen, we are talking about humans. The Memory, I see you on. You can maybe just introduce yourself and just a brief background a little bit. It's a pleasure to have an industrial psychologist in our midst today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Memory, you can introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Nguwi. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm an occupational psychologist and also a consultant. I've got about 18 years experience in HR, both in consulting and line management. I sit on a number of boards, both here in Zim and also in the region. So I deal with these issues that we are talking about every day. How do we get people to work in the current environment? So my perspective will purely be leaning more towards the psychology part in terms of how we get people to work.
Okay. If you, just a little bit of housekeeping, if you can hear us well, just type a Y, yes, on chat, so that we know you can hear us very, very well. If any one of the speakers has, maybe you are having technical issues hearing them, you can type no, and then we'll be able to adjust that. Okay, great. And also, just to inform you, today we will be asking for participation from the audience. So if you would have something to say or a question you'd like to ask, kindly chat me directly and we will put you on. And also just to share, this session is being recorded. So as you come up, know you're live on online. So back to our sessions, today's session. In the beginning, God created humans. And we all know how that went. And we found ourselves out of the Garden of Eden. And man found that he had to work. Man was not even made, had not been created to work. And so we find ourselves in situations where we have humans at the workplace and humans are not meant to work. So, and I think that is one of the source of all the headaches that we have as managers, managing people. So, but to share with us more, we have Memory. So, quick question for you, Memory. Who exactly is an industrial psychologist and what do they do?
Okay, thank you very much. Industrial psychologists, they study how people work and how we can make people more productive. But if you look at it, we add value from entry up to exit when someone joins the organization. If you look at most of our work, probably 40% of what we do is really about getting the right person for the job. This is both the right person in terms of attitude, in terms of personality, in terms of cognitive ability, makeup of the individual. Because most of the mistakes that people make when they're selecting people can be traced at entry. Because if you look at all the problems that probably you have in your organization related to the individuals that you have hired, you probably notice that those issues could have been picked at entry when someone joined. Then when someone is in the job, we also look at the work design. Are they in the right job? Are they motivated enough to do the work? For example, there's no point in hiring the best person for the job when they have no interest in the job that they're doing, because they're not going to be productive. So that's a challenge. Then so the whole value chain, when it get to the end, in terms of exit, you are now looking at issues to do with how do you make sure that if you are going to terminate someone's employment, you do it in a humane way, what we call humanizing the workplace. And that is actually lacking, given the catastrophe that has actually arisen out of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's a big challenge for everyone who has got a role to do with managing people. So that's basically what we do. It's making you comfortable, bringing people into the organization, making them productive, and help them to exit with dignity.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Memory. So on chat, we'd like to know where you're joining us. If you could share the country you're joining us from, just to know who's in the house, and then we'll get to our first activity of the poll. Just to share, today's session is an interactive session where we have Memory to take us through this session. Just be Memory is a remember you didn't tell people you have a TED talk online on YouTube available. I was watching it this morning. You will tell us more about that, and we'll also be talking more about what the content of that YouTube talk.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
seeing people from Kenya, Uganda, I think I saw Zambia, Kenya, yes. Okay. Great. So as you're joining in, and you can share with us where you're from. If you have any question, you can type it on chat. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be inviting one or two people to maybe ask a question or to say something. So if you want to be that person, you can chat me up on privately on chat, and then we can arrange to have you on. So Memory, why don't I
Yes.
pass the ball to you and you can tell us? But before we do that, we have a poll we'd like to 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 run so that it'll help us set the tone for this session. So I am just sharing a poll with two questions. And first question is, how do you feel about the future? And this is in relation to your work, job, business. The multiple choice. A, the future is exciting and full of potential. B, the future is full of uncertainty and risk. C, the future is terrifying and unknowable. D, all the above in varying degrees at various times. Then the second question is, what is your greatest fear? A, the work life will not go to normal. I like the old normal. I am uncertain if I'll still be having a job soon with the way things are going. C, the crisis is a blessing in disguise, has hastened a number of things. The future is here now. There is nothing to fear. And D, I don't know what to make of things. Too uncertain. So if you can, we can all take both polls, and let's see what the general feeling is for everyone in the room. So I'd also want to welcome the 50 HR professionals who are with us, from various countries. I'm seeing Nigeria in the house, Zambia, Kenya, and also within Kenya, the various cities in the country. Okay, we have about 26 people who have taken the poll. If we can hit 30, I think we can review what we're seeing. Okay, 28 people so far. So Memory, what I want to do is I want to share this poll, and
Okay.
from your perspective of a industrial psychologist, we can be able to analyze what we think is happening out there.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Okay, so we have 30 people who have taken, that is 60%. So I'm closing the poll and just sharing it now. Let me share the results of this poll. And Memory, over to you, just to maybe help us understand.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. If you look at the first question, how do you feel about the future in relation to work, job, business? You will find that 48% are saying the future is exciting and full of potential. And that is not unusual. Even if you look at other research done elsewhere, there are some people who are very optimistic, and I'm happy that about 50%, close to 50% of the people are very optimistic about the future. And it's very likely that people who feel very optimistic about the future are people who are prepared, they're psychologically prepared for the future. So that's a good thing. Then the future is full of uncertainty and risk. Again, in line with the previous research, you find about 26% of the people are uncertain about the future. And these people who are uncertain about the future, it could be actually emanating internally from themselves, that they are naturally people who fear everything that is uncertain. It could also be, they could be sitting on the environment where they are in, which is very uncertain, which is creating this kind of situation. It could actually be internally to their own organization or their own family. then all of the above varying degrees at various stages, 35%, which means this group is also uncertain about the future in terms of what needs to be done. What is your greatest fear? You find there, you can look at the crisis. I would start with the 68%. The crisis is a blessing in disguise. It hasn't the number of things. The future now is here and there's nothing to fear about. And if you look at all the changes in terms of innovation that have been done in the world during previous crises, the Great Depression, look at many others, the financial crisis, you'll find that most of the innovation was done during that time. The good thing about this particular crisis, it's not particular to any particular country. It's happening across the globe. So the people in Japan, the people in the USA, the people in Honolulu, all of them are actually going through the same problem. Very few countries did not go through lockdown. So you can't say it's unique to yourself. So it's the biggest, largest social experiment of our time, if we look at it. And most people are actually benefiting. They are learning from this particular experiment. So the 68% who are saying it's a blessing in disguise, I totally agree with them. I'm uncertain if I still have a job soon after the way things are going. The uncertainty around jobs is a reality. And if you look at developed countries like America and other countries, a lot of people have lost their jobs. Africa is not going to be an exception in this, but this will probably be varying depending on a particular country, depending on the labor laws in each country. In some countries, it's not very easy to get rid of people. So while it's going to happen, it will probably take longer in some countries, depending on the statutory regulations in those particular countries. Then 3%, that work life will not go to normal. I'm sure you've looked at the polls. You'll find that we did a survey here in Zim, for example. We found that roughly about 50% of the people don't want to go back to work. They want to work from home. And I was talking to someone in the morning from the US, and the same polls, the same findings are actually across the globe, where roughly close to 50% of the people are actually very comfortable working from home. And the reason for that, we don't know. In some cases, some people had already the infrastructure to work from home. In some cases, it gives you the freedom to manage your work. There are other issues that we will talk about related to this. But what is surprising, across all the surveys, you'll notice that one of the things that is coming out clearly is that people are feeling lonely, even from those that are working from home. There is an element of loneliness that is there. The social network that these people had built in the work environment, your colleagues in the work environment who used to support you, they still support you through the work from home environment, but it's not as useful as you would get when you're talking to someone face to face. So the people are going to miss face-to-face interaction with their colleagues. That's a challenge that we are seeing there.
Oh, great. Okay, now from what I'm seeing, yesterday I think there's an organization that actually released like a guide to laying off people, the conversations to laying off people. Um, and I think the group that is here were the organizations that will be laying off people. The HR who are represented here will be doing that role, that task. What are the challenges you'd expect to be facing from that? Because if you consider you're laying off a group of people, it becomes it psychologically affects you even much more or nearly as equal as the people you're laying off.
Yeah, maybe let's start with the first problem. The first problem whenever you are going to lay off people is either being reactive or your long-term workforce plan was not really that solid. Because if you've got a workforce plan that is solid, sometimes you do know what is the optimum number of people that we need to keep in order to be viable as a business. But in practice, what we do know is that in good times, people tend to overemploy people. And as an HR professional, this is one area that we need to really focus on, where we really work on optimization of the workforce so that in bad times, you can still sustain the workforce. There is no, one of the worst things that can happen to an organization, if you continuously lay out people, you're damaging your employer brand in the process, because people will not forget how they are let loose by an organization. So that's a challenge for you. But going back to the psychological component of this particular situation, the tricky part is you all know that as an HR professional, the first thing that happens is that the organization will ask you to lead the layoff process. But at the end, be very careful that you are also on the list. They won't tell you in advance most of the time, but naturally you will be on the list. You can imagine the psychological impact of having laid off other people, then you are the last one to be told to leave. You will be managed probably as an individual to leave the organization. So that's a big challenge for you. But the psychological component of it is that when you lay off people, the impact is not necessarily being felt by those that are leaving. The big impact in terms of productivity, in terms of morale, in terms of engagement, in terms of experience, is felt more by the people who are actually left in the organization. Because if you are left in the organization after a layoff, the first thing that comes to your mind is to say, let me prepare, I may actually be the next one. Because we know in practice, in cases of this nature, that when an organization lays off people, they can do the first batch, but it's very likely they're going to come back for the second time because they may not have done their mess properly. So you may be one of them. So employees are actually feeling that they need to prepare for the next stage of the layoff process. So uncertainty comes in, productivity suffers, a lot of mistakes are going to be done as people are doing their work, as they are not sure. Those that have got high skills in demand are likely to look for jobs. So those are some of the consequences that you're likely to see as you go through the layoffs. But also remember, we are doing layoffs as a result of a pandemic. And if you go back to research, you'll notice that after layoffs, most people tend to go into suffer health problems, hypertension, and other related diseases after they are laid off. And you can imagine what will happen to them after being laid off in the middle of a pandemic. In the middle of a pandemic, without money, without most of the African countries do not have the right social support systems to be able to support the employees.
Great. Okay. So as we proceed, I think if you have any question, kindly type it in chat. We welcome all questions. This is want to be an interactive session. Again, something memory you mentioned, HR will be leading the layoff. Now, and I want to relate this to about what you were talking in your TED talk about competencies, about personality, that the good workers we are having right now, or the bad ones, were not formed now, but they were formed just maybe before they were 10 years old, right? Mm-hmm. So how would you recommend, how do you select who to release, who to keep?
Yeah, it goes back to the issue of the workforce plan that I was talking about and optimization. The key thing is, you may find that volumes in terms of the work that you were doing has gone down significantly, and that is affecting all organizations across the globe, unless you are in a technology company where you are supporting working from home. But most companies have been affected. The supply chains have been disrupted, demand has been disrupted, consumer interests are going to change because of this pandemic and these changes. So these are things that are happening now. So when you are selecting the people that you are going to lay off, most of the time we know, especially in Africa, that if you are not in good books with the bosses, you are likely to go. That's although not professional. The second one is those who are poor performers are also likely to go. But you need to be very careful that as you are selecting the people to go, even if there is no work now, please don't lose the key skills that you have. There are key skills that you are going to pay more to recruit 3-10 months from now because you've laid them off now because there's no work for them to do. I wanted to take you back a bit from your question on the TED Talk, where we were saying that the foundation of any skill is, if you go to research, especially work done by Schmidt in 2016, you will notice that the foundation of any skill in the world, the first one is cognitive ability, the ability to think and find solutions to problems. And it's not in abundance in a lot of people. That is very crucial for you to know. And that ability to think and solve problems, which is called cognitive ability or general mental ability, is largely hereditary. Roughly about 70 to 80% of that is largely hereditary. And there's nothing you can do. And after age 10, for most people, there's no way you can improve the cognitive ability significantly of an individual. But below the age of 10, environment plays a big part. You can actually improve the cognitive ability of the people, which means basically the employees that you are hiring. So if you hire the wrong person with the wrong cognitive makeup, There's nothing that you're going to do. Training will help, but with the marginal increases in terms of capacity to do the work. So that's the challenge number one. So what does it mean for you as an HR professional? The first thing that you need to do is you must make sure that whoever joins your organization has got the right cognitive makeup for the role that they're going into. The second part is the personality. Personality in certain jobs helps you do the job, but I want to speak at personality from another angle, which is what is called derailment. Derailment means you've got very brilliant people, very intelligent people, but who do stupid things because of their personality. What I normally prefer to call in psychology intelligent fools. These are people who are really gifted in terms of the capacity to think about issues, but they've got a terrible personality problem. So that's called derailment. If you look at America, there were estimates in 2016, they were estimating that a personality derailment of leaders cost the US economy roughly about 32 billion per year. And that's a lot of money that organizations are losing. And also remember, personality is a permanent disposition. Basically, it rarely changes unless there's a significant change in the cognitive makeup of the individual. It's largely hereditary again, and partly childhood experience before the age of 10. So when you look at that, if you hire the wrong person, again, you're going to be with them for the rest of your life. Just be honest to yourself and look at it this way and say, there are people that you have hired thinking they've got the capacity and they've tried everything and nothing changed. There are people that you have hired and they've tried to change their personality. They will change for a few minutes, then after that they relapse to their old ways. I can do an exercise with you. Just a short exercise. This is funny. Just take your pen and paper for now. Just take your pen and paper. Take your pen and paper. Okay, ready?
Taking a pen and paper.
Take a pen and paper. I want you to write your signature. Don't show anyone. I want you to write your signature. Okay, done. Use the other hand to write the same signature. Very uncomfortable, isn't it? Very uncomfortable to use the other hand, and unless you are, very uncomfortable. So what happens is that when you look at an individual personality, it's like writing a signature. There is a certain way that you will behave because of your personality. If people are forcing you to behave out of your personality, it's like writing the signature using the other hand. That is, you normally don't use. So I just want to emphasize there, the best value that HR people can give to an organization is to screen people at entry and get the right people first time. That's the best way, both in terms of personality, both in terms of the cognitive ability of the individual. So that when it comes to layoffs, you can then say, who are the people who have got the best skills that we require going into the future? Because you can't only lay off people on the basis of what has happened now. Because if you take half of the skills that you require 10 years from now or 5 years from now, you may actually spend more money trying to replace those people.
Okay, so based on what you have just told us, and considering people are recruiting and hiring based on an interaction of 10 minutes, how do we make it easy? Because you're expecting to know how the person would perform in future from a 10 minutes, 30 minutes interaction.
Yeah, let's go back to science, because what I'm talking about is evidence, which is scientific evidence. Let's go back to science. This is what science says. If you go back to the interview method, if it's not structured and it's not done properly, what is called the predictive validity of the interview, or the ability of the interview to predict job performance, is only 8%, which means there is a 92% error variance in an interview. When you are recruiting using the unstructured interviews alone, it's almost like tossing a coin. It's really guesswork that you're doing. So the interview method is one of the worst ways of selecting people that is available, but the most popular in selecting people. Because naturally, when people are selecting people using the interview method, they select people who are exactly like them, who behave exactly like them, who they like, who dress the way they want, who probably come from the same region, who come from the same school, and all those things bring in what is called error variance in selection. So the interview alone is not the best way to select people. It's really like playing lotto with people's lives. It's not the best way to select people. Because from science alone, because of its predictive validity, which is only 8%, which means there is an error variance of 92% in the interview method. There are other ways of selecting people. For example, your cognitive profiling, your personality profiling, your assessment centers, or these are other better methods of selecting people and they're more reliable and more predictive in terms of validity.
Yeah. So just before we go on, I hear that there are some questions, and maybe I can direct this uh, from Mula Wakipeka. When staff are at home on unpaid leave and you need to recall a few staff to work on a recovery plan, how best should it be done to avoid undue anxiety to the rest of the team?
Sorry, I didn't get the question, sorry.
When staff are at home or on unpaid leave, most organizations have sent their people on unpaid leave, yeah, and you need to recall a few staff to work on a recovery plan. How best should it be done to avoid undue anxiety to the rest of the team?
Yeah, but I think the best thing is, if you look even at research that has been done, the best thing is for leaders in the organization to communicate why they are recalling people. And in this case, it's a recovery plan to save the organization. So everyone must know, they must not guess. Because if you recall a few people, others start thinking about, maybe my job is already on the line, I'm not going to go back. So communication is the first thing. Communication, one, and communicate clearly why some people are being recalled back to the workplace. It will take time, and naturally, some people, even if you communicate very clearly, they will interpret that as them being left out of the employment. They may think that they're going to be laid off. So communicate and reassure the people. Reassure the unfortunate part with technology, depending on the numbers that you employ, sometimes it's not very easy to then have a video conference call like what we are doing now, so that people can see the facial expressions. Because if you look at communication that goes through an email, you can't tell whether the person who was writing it was happy. Because the reason why we want face-to-face communication is so that we can look at the non-verbal cues that comes out of this particular communication. So my advice to him is, to them is, communicate, and it must be very clear, and this communication must be communicated to all the employees. We are going on a recovery plan. We are going to recall some of your colleagues to work on the recovery plan. It will take 2 weeks for these colleagues to be working on the recovery plan, and after that, they may go back to work from home, or after that, we then decide how do we call in people. Some people have done a phased approach. For example, I know one organization that I know very well here. What they've done is to say, production people who are actually working on a product are the first people to come. All the other support functions will come later in terms of their coming back to work plan. So there's no guesswork that then happens. Say production people must come first, sales people must come next, and you stagger that and communicate to your staff. That should be easy.
Oh, great. Okay, so as people are preparing to go back, I know some few countries that people have already, people in Nigeria say, resumed. What do they expect to find, and what do you think their mental states would be, bearing in mind the way the whole entire crisis situation is like?
You know, the good thing about this whole crisis is that it's not unique to Nigeria, it's not unique to Zimbabwe, it's not unique to Zambia. How people are dealing with these issues is all over the news, it's all over social media, some true, some untrue. But for an organization, if you are reopening in terms of the mental state of the people, remember, how people deal with situations is largely dependent on their personality. There's some people who really handle situations very well. What we call in psychology, these are people who are well adjusted. You know, when someone is well adjusted, they're stable, they can handle pressure, they can handle stressful situations. Such kind of people find it very easy to deal with challenges of this nature. Then there are people who are highly neurotic, people who are not well adjusted. They panic at every given opportunity where something is out of control. They panic. Such people are likely to really experience serious problems. We do know mental health is a big problem at this stage, in the sense that there are some people who are already in depression. These are people who really are saying to themselves, I have no control over what is happening. I don't know what to do. That kind of behavior will definitely lead some people into a depression. When we did a study here in Zim, we found that, for example, at some stage we had about 45% of the people in distress, which is basically distress moving almost into a depression. 45% of the workforce, and we had over 9,900 people that participated in that particular study. And that was during a normal situation, in our situation. But you can imagine the kind of people who are in distress at this stage across the globe. It's even studies that have come out, they've shown that a lot of people are in distress. Some have already moved into a depression stage. and they need help in terms of mental health and in terms of help. And more so, there are people who are actually being found COVID-19 positive, and these will really need a specific program for helping them cope with this particular challenge that they have.
Great. So there we go. We have another question, and maybe I'd like to handle this. The floor is still open for people who would want to come live, ask some questions, or comment on something that they've had in the session. There's a question in full by Valentine Korir. In full recognition that different countries have different legislation around layoff due to the lack of profitability, hence business is not able to sustain employees. How legal is this, especially for countries that subscribe to ILO provisions? If there is someone in the legal field, we'd like to welcome them. It's more of a legal question oriented. We'd like to welcome them to maybe say something about that. But in the meanwhile, as we wait for that kind of person to share with us, Memory, what do you think someone needs going back to work to succeed? What kind of mental frame do they require?
Yeah, I think those who are techno-savvy are likely to find it very easy. That's number one. Number two, they also need to really frame their mind to the fact that change is going to be constant. This is only the beginning. We are seeing a lot, even if you look at predictions that have been done, you will notice that a lot of think tanks are predicting that there's going to be a lot of realignment of organizational structures as a result of COVID-initiated induced changes. There's going to be a realignment of headcount across the organization. So everyone in any organization at this stage can be laid off, depending on how the organization is restructuring. If you look just one example, the way the supply chains were disrupted because of what happened in China initially, and then the lockdowns that then brought this. There are some companies where they can't source any raw material simply because of the lockdowns. So the changes are here for everyone, and it's not happening to you alone. I think the best consolation for everyone is that this is a global pandemic. This is a global pandemic that is affecting even well-resourced companies that are struggling. And as a result of that, you must be ready to either face the consequences of a layoff or move forward by supporting your organization to be more productive. Because if you're in a high positions and you're strategic in terms of leadership role, you need to start thinking and say, how do we turn around the organization? How do we move the organization, probably without laying off a single person? We've got so many examples of organizations that have said to themselves, they are not going to lay off any employee, they are going to find a way out of this particular crisis. I think that's the kind of mentality that we require in mind frame, especially from leaders. Defaulting to layoffs, yes, it's easy, but the long-term damage to the organization is actually immense if you default to laying off people.
So there's an interesting question here for you, Memory, and I think this falls right into your street. What psychological consequences may be faced with employees that have been laid off on account of not having adequate funding, but still being asked to perform some work? A little bit of contradiction there. You're laid off and you're still being asked to do some work. What I've seen is, or I've heard around, is people are sent on unpaid leave, but they're still requested to work. So maybe we can look at that perspective, where you have been laid off, you're on unpaid leave, but you're still being asked to work. What would be the psychological consequences of that?
Maybe the starting point is that the issue of leave it really varies by jurisdiction. In our case, for example, there is no way you can send someone on unpaid leave and then force them to do some work. But anyway, let me go back to the psychological consequences of layoffs. There is plenty of scientific evidence available related to consequences of layoff. The first consequence that normally happens to people when they are laid off is that their mental health get affected immediately. They go into a depression, they suffer a lot of stress, they may actually need to go on to medication. Their physical health suffers. There is even research that shows that if you track people who have been laid off depending on how they've been laid off. Some may even end up dying within 5 years of being laid off. So the consequences are immense. Most organizations overlook this, but in my experience with some of the international organizations, that they will never lay off an individual without taking them through a psychological intervention program, so that they are assisted in the process of being laid off. So the consequences are mental health and physical health. They normally start with mental health, then it deteriorates into physical health. And there's plenty of evidence to show that roughly about 36% in some instances of the people that are laid off do get immediately into depression, they do get immediately into physical health problems, and they would need to be assisted. That's why you find sometimes when people lay off people, they make sure that their medical insurance is valid for at least a year to be able to assist them in that particular instance.
Okay, very interesting comments here, and maybe you can share if you've come across this from someone named SS. I am very anxious. I got a message yesterday that next week we'll resume working from the office. I've been working home since 16th March. I'm so used to the house now that I've been indoors 2 months, and I don't know how to now get back to those office working routines.
Yeah, a very interesting comment there, but also look at the research that has been done in the past month or 4 weeks or so. They are all indicating to roughly over 50% of the people who are very comfortable working from home, who will find it a challenge to transition back to the office. Because now when you transition back to the office, you've got the luxury of saying, I'm now going back to the office. How am I going to interact with my colleagues? And also remember, there are some managers who are managing people in the workplace. And most of from research that most of us are poorly managed anyway. So most people are really comfortable in their own house. You don't have a shouting boss. You don't have a micromanaging boss. You don't have bosses who are really thirsty for power, who want to see your faces in the workplace. And these are the desperate bosses that are actually looking for you to come back to work so that they can harass you, they can feel better. What we call narcissistic bosses. These are the narcissists that are looking for people to come back to work so that they can harass them. And some of us are very unfortunate if you got a boss who is a psychopath. A psychopath is someone with no conscience. They will harass you, they will insult you without feeling any sense of sympathy at all. For those that want to read, I would like you to read a book called Snakes in Suits. Snakes in Suits. Write that down, Snakes in Suits. It will tell you about these bosses. That's why some of the people are really scared to go back to work. But some of the other reason why people are really feeling comfortable at home is that they can control the environment. Most of the work situation that we have in our organizations, they have no control. You're told what to do, you're told where to sit, you're told how to make decisions. So when you're at home, you've got your control of your own environment. So I would really, even myself, I can work from home. I'm very comfortable working from home because I'm in control of my own environment. Besides being a boss, but I can control my own environment.
Great. So something just someone is asking who would be the author of who is the author of the Snakes in Suits?
I'll look for the author. I can check it right away while we are doing the other questions.
Okay. So we'd want to welcome questions from the audience. If you want to come on live, it's a very interactive session. Don't be shy. Also take advantage. We have 80 HR professionals from various countries. You can make connections on LinkedIn from here. Like I just shared my LinkedIn ID. If you'd like to connect with me and see what we post I post every other day. My thoughts around issues, you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. And also you can also look to connect. Over the weekend, I did
so the book
conference. Okay.
Yeah, the author of this book is called Robert D. Hare, H-A-R-E. For those that can see my phone, that's you can see the man is in.
Actually,
yeah.
Yes, actually, Catherine,
yes.
Kate Wekesa has just put it on chat. The name is Robert D. Hare.
Yes.
Yes, Great.
I would
Okay.
urge everyone to read that. If you've got managers of that nature in your organization, they're basically killing your organization.
Okay. Something interesting you mentioned there about bosses who want to see people on desks so that they can harass them. At the beginning of this, and I think the audience might either agree or disagree with me. It was being said that HR is having the hardest time because they're managing people they cannot see, and they're used to managing people who they're seeing. Are we likely to be moving from a culture of I am there, you see me, I am not there, see what I have done?
Yeah,
Is that
I think
you might be?
yeah, the basic assumption that is probably being challenged at this particular time is that people work when you can only see them, and that's a bad assumption. That is being challenged by the working from home approach. Most managers are used to seeing people on their desks. They walk into the office, they give instructions, they call people into their offices. So that is, they can just look important, really. The key shift in mindset that needs to happen is that we must go to results based. We must go evidence based. Where we are saying, regardless of where you are, whatever you're doing, what I want is the results. You agree those results up front with the employees. Ambushing employees in order to catch them doing something wrong is a bad philosophy for managing people. So what we are saying there is, let's move away from this idea of wanting to see people clocking in. Let's go and look at the people who are producing results. So the focus now should be, whether in HR or any other department, the focus must be results, nothing else. And that must be the basis of how we manage people rather than anything else.
Great. Okay, I'm seeing someone has just shared a PDF of the book, right? So you can be able to download and then you can read later on. Question to the audience, and we can type the response on chat. Does the organization have, or rather have you created our remote working policy, either due to this crisis or it was existing before? So question is, does the organization have a remote work policy?
So
Memory, if you
yes.
could share if you could share on chat your LinkedIn ID, the people would want to connect with you, and I think that would be great. Yeah, you can share your LinkedIn ID and people can connect with you.
Yeah, I'm sharing now. It's both on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Is the same. That's
Yeah.
it. Memory Nguwi. That's my LinkedIn profile there, and also Facebook and Twitter. We can continue this discussion. Very interesting discussion indeed.
Oh yes, oh yes. There's something else I saw. Um, there was a question here on. Okay, someone from James. At the beginning of the year, we had well-defined targets, but with the pandemic, most of the targets we had set out are seriously lagging behind and might not be achieved by the end of the year. How will performance be measured this year?
Okay, yeah, I think the first one of the cardinals of performance management is that it must always take into consideration the changes in the environment. So if the targets are no longer realistic, it's up to you, the manager, to sit down and agree on realigning the targets to the new environment, the new reality in your organization. What we find in practice that most of the assessments that are done, because they're done routinely, they're done without really focus, you find that employees are not involved in the setting of the target. Sometimes they are not involved in coming up with those targets. So what is crucial in any performance management is that targets must always be agreed upfront. No involvement, no commitment. If you don't involve the people that are setting the targets, they won't commit to them. They may take them at face value, but they won't commit to them. So I would suggest for this individual that they sit down with their boss and take into consideration the new environment and say, is this still realistic given the new situation? Then the targets may need to be adjusted. We are seeing around the globe, budgets are being revised, performance targets are being revised. That's the right way to go.
Great, great. Okay. Any question from the audience? Oh yes, I'm not seeing response. Yes, does the organization have a remote work policy? That's the one. Let's see whether how well people are prepared for remote working in terms of paperwork. Does the organization have a remote work policy?
Okay, you're asking to the audience, isn't it?
To the audience, which we can
Yeah.
have on chat.
Yeah, they can put yes or no, but if you look at research that I've looked at in the past few days, you'll notice that only 15% had their staff working from home before this pandemic. So
Yes.
we are assuming that probably those organizations had a remote work from home policy. Majority didn't have. Roughly 90% of them didn't, 80% of them didn't have.
Something else I've seen coming up over the last, I think, 1 week is a return to work policy. Return to work policy. Has anybody? Does anybody here in here? Your organization has something around the return to work policy. I'm seeing a question. Please, can you throw more insight on how to develop? I'm assuming that is the remote working policy. Just
you know,
mention.
Yeah,
yes?
you know, the good thing about all this, the return to the work from home policy, they are already there. They are international organizations that have already developed. I'll try to look and share, if I can go into my archives on some of the people who were sharing with me on the return to work policy. They are there, very well done. Then work from home policy, they are there, very well done. So if you look, I think ILO, they have something else well related to the return to work policy and work from home. But I'll try to look in my archives in other groups where I belong. We have shared this extensively in terms of the policy development. You don't need to reinvent the wheel because the policies are already there. What you need then is to customize them to suit your own environment and particular sector that you're in.
Great, great. Okay. There's a question of ILO which we had not responded to about guidance of laying off people. We haven't found someone in legal.
My own
memory.
Yeah, my own experience is that the statutes do differ by country, but in most cases, if I will give you an example in Zimbabwe, before you lay off people, you must have shown that you have tried by all means to mitigate the situation through other means. For example, salary cuts, it's allowed in terms of our statutes. If the company is in a tight situation and they are not generating enough business, they can go in salary cuts, they can do short time, which means instead of working for a full month, you can maybe work 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out. So there are various ways of doing that. But I think if you go back to the ILO conventions, you will find that everything that you are going to do to your employees, try to avoid being unilateral. What it basically means is that you must also involve your employees, consult, negotiate with your employees before you just go and say, you are fired. You're no longer going to work. So the consultative approach is what is underpinning the ILO conventions.
Great, okay. I hope that answers that. There was something about assessment center. You mentioned assessment center as one of the alternatives to the interview process. What may be some of the disadvantages of the assessment centers?
Okay, the disadvantage of assessment centers is you rarely get people who have got the capacity to be assessors. Because most people, when they're being trained to be assessors, we find gaps in the people that are doing assessment centers. So if you want to make your assessment centers very reliable and highly predictive in terms of performance, you need to make sure that you invest a lot of money in identifying who is going to be assessor. Do they have the right knowledge? Do they have do they understand how to rate the people? So the training of assessors is actually very crucial. Let me tell you something that I have found in most people are recruiting. What they do is you shortlist candidates. Okay, you do a short list of candidates. Let's say you have got 8 of them. Most people, what they do, they go through an interview. Then go back to assessment center. The best way to do is to use the most reliable method first, okay? Then drift towards the less reliable. So the first method that you need to use, the one is your cognitive ability in terms of reliability, they are 8.9. okay, in terms of predictive power. Because if you look at research, you notice that cognitive ability explains 65% of the variation in performance across all jobs, regardless of level, okay? Then you then go to other factors. Your integrity gives you around 23%, the integrity of the individual. So I will look at those two as the biggest starting point: cognitive assessment, integrity, personality assessment. Then I'll do the interviews. The interview should be the last one. Then after that, you do an assessment center. Then the interview is the last one in terms of implementing this.
Okay, great. So we have 9 minutes before our hour is over. As we wait for any other question, maybe what I'd like to ask is, what do you think as a HR in the coming future will need we will need to succeed?
Yeah, you know, the HR is moving in the direction. If you have watched, I really liked the way some countries were managing the issue of COVID-19. Let's look at some of the best countries in terms of response outside Africa. Look at New Zealand, look at Singapore, look at South Korea, look at Taiwan, look at Germany. Those are some of the best countries in terms of managing the COVID-19 pandemic. You know what? The underlying approach in all those countries that they used evidence to inform policy. So my advice to HR people is that in the management of people, the trend nowadays is to look at data and evidence before you inform policy. So evidence-based management is the right way to go. When you look at, and the quality of evidence will vary. Some will come from scientific evidence, some will come from experience, some will come from many sources of evidence. There are so many sources of evidence. Don't inform policy based on your gut feel or based on opinions of people, at least they are really top experts. Because most of our, my experience is that most people do their policies, make decisions on the basis of opinions or a newspaper headlines, and that's the worst way to do it. So the best way to do with HR is to go evidence-based.
Great. I'm just seeing someone asking, Christina, please elaborate a little more on cognitive profiling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cognitive profiling is what is normally called general mental ability. And in general mental ability, there are 3 tests that are normally given. The first one is what is called verbal reasoning, which does not speak to how well you speak English, but they speak to the logic in what you write and say. Then the second one is numerical reasoning, which is basically the basis of sound judgment. If the people who have got very high numerical reasoning tend to also have a very good basis for sound judgment. The other one is abstract reasoning, which is a non-verbal reasoning test. That's what is called general mental ability. And predominantly, those are the core tests in assessing cognitive profiling. Nowadays, we are going a step further to assess things like your critical thinking. And critical thinking tend to predict success, especially in leadership roles. So those are the core in terms of cognitive profiling. So once you've done your cognitive profiling, you can then do also your personality profiling, just to assess whether the person doesn't have personality defects. And if you look at personality defects, there's been debate about the US as an example. Donald Trump, I'm sure all of us are aware of that. I'm sure you can see some clips of some personality defects there on Donald Trump as an individual, more of a narcissistic kind of individual that you are seeing there. And we know the prevalence of narcissistic leaders across the globe is actually very high. So some of the people that you think are achieving results, they are using fear and intimidation as they are managing. And those results are actually short-lived. They don't last that long because eventually people will leave, eventually people get demoralized and find their way out.
Great. Okay.
Then there's another, I wanted to just let it, there's a question on assessment center as a development tool. An assessment center is the best way to identify leadership development needs, because an assessment center is a simulation, because it simulates the actual job. Okay, because in an assessment center, here are some of the simulations that you go through a leaderless group discussion where people go through, you might want to find their teamwork ability, the presentation, communication, that's exercise number 1. They go through an in-basket exercise, simulating the role. They go through a presentation, they go through a role play. So far, the assessment method is probably one of the best ways to assess competencies in terms of science if you want to go scientific. That's the best way. There's no other way. 360 degrees will help, but it's not as scientific as the assessment center in terms of actually identifying who has got what competencies and to what level.
Okay, great. So 4 minutes before we end, not seeing any other question. There's something you mentioned.
There's one question, the last one there, where someone is saying, maybe I missed this, what would be the best leadership trait post-COVID? This one, I think people can put in the chat there, and I do know from research that there are others, but maybe let's hear from the people. They can just write, what do you think is one leadership competence that people would need post-COVID?
Okay, from your thoughts, just share what you think is the one leadership skill trait that post-COVID leaders will need. And maybe as we get yes?
The one of them is already there. It's agility, the ability to respond to the environment in real time. It's what we leaders will need. There are companies that are going to be closed for good simply because they took COVID changes lightly. So agility, which is related to flexibility. Empathy is one of them, very crucial for managers. Let's humanize the workplace. That's my core. Let's make the workplace human. We are dealing with human beings, and that's the majority of your assets that we have, although they don't go on the balance sheet. But those are the key people that we have. Let's humanize the workplace. If you've got empathy, you will be able to listen. And so agility, empathy, and let's humanize the workplace. Those will be my top 3.
Great. Okay. So to wind up, there was something interesting I had on your TED Talk, and I'll share with everyone on the next mailer, the link to your TED Talk, and they can listen for themselves. You were talking about placing the right people with the right mental capability to the right roles. Mm-hmm. Yes. You could just expound a little bit on that so that we're getting it right.
Yeah, let me give you a scenario here. The first, the premises for putting people into roles is the work of Elliot Jacquet. You know, what he has done is, the unfortunate part, most of his books can't be found, but I do have them. So what has happened is that work can be put into levels. They range from level 1 to level 8. That's in terms of cognitive complexity. How complex is this work in terms of the thinking capacity required for that work? So it goes up to level 8. Okay, with your level 1 being really your routine stuff. This is nothing to do with job evaluation. This is work graded in terms of cognitive complexity of the job. Okay, so let's take an example. Most organizations, their CEOs will be what we call level 5 roles, especially for Africa, unless they're really a multinational. So a level 5 role, it requires a certain level of cognitive ability. So what you tend to happen is that if you get someone, you put someone in a level 5 role that requires level 5 cognitive ability, but their actual level of cognitive capacity is level 3, which is a foreman role, okay? What they will do is they take that role, which is a CEO role, and bring it down to the foreman's role. So this is where you find a CEO who talks about tea, office consumables, instead of looking at opening doors for the organization. The CEO, who is a level 5 organization, should never focus internally. They're really opening doors for you outside. They're opening new relationships. They're to bring in new stakeholders. So that tends to happen. So people who have got no capacity for their roles, and they're put into high roles where they have no capacity, they bring those roles down to lower levels, and the organization suffers in that process. Going back to the issue of cognitive capacity, I just wanted to explain that. There is evidence. Let's go back to evidence. The best predictor of anyone's performance, whether it's your house, your maid, your gardener, across all roles, is the level of thinking capacity. I'm sure you've worked with people, when you work with people who really have got the thinking capacity, you find that they're switched on, things happen, you don't have to push them, things happen, because they've got the right cognitive ability for the role. So 65% of the variation in performance can be explained by thinking capacity alone. Then you add on personality, then integrity about 21%. Then you add on things like your personality, especially conscientiousness, which is diligence, the ability to plan and get things done. And most of us are not gifted with that kind of trait, which is the ability to get things done. There are some people that you work with who I would prefer to call a bottomless pit. To give them something, They're always struggling. You go to them, they'll tell you the papers were here, I'll look for them. Can you resend another email? Go again tomorrow, they give you exactly the same excuse. It means those individuals have got very low conscientiousness. So that is a personality trait that predicts performance. It's a very big predictor of performance. Then there's also another trait, which is one of the big five, which is openness to experience, the ability to assimilate and embrace new ways of doing things, which is openness to experience. And some people are not gifted to with that as well. And when people who are high on openness to experience tend to be highly innovative. So when you go back to science, you don't struggle. So the starting point for HR people is say, what works? What does science say? When we say science, the best form of scientific research outside the experiments is what are called meta-analytic studies, which is a collection of all the best studies around a particular area. And that's what I normally look at, nothing else. So if I want to say what actually predicts job performance, just go and Google. You'll actually get those meta-analytic studies. One of the best person to look at is Schmidt. Schmidt did the study in 2016. It's where he was looking at 100 years of research. It's the best research document available so far on predicting employee performance. I would urge people to look at that. I can also send you the article via your WhatsApp platform. You can share with people that are on this particular platform. And that should be the starting point for anyone who cares about selection of individuals to do any work.
Okay, so we will share what memory sends to us with everyone on email, and thank you very much. There's something else maybe to close this session. Lily, do you see any of these cognitive skills being replaced by AI transformation process? If yes, which ones? I think that's a very interesting question we can answer.
It's a very interesting question, because remember, artificial intelligence, what it's trying to do is to basically replicate your mind, to say the way you think is basically what artificial intelligence is doing. And already there are some jobs that are already affected by artificial intelligence. And I do believe that long term, we are going to get there. But also remember, in terms of technology now, instead of you going through a test to see whether you've got cognitive ability and everything, there's new research where people are actually looking at your DNA, because cognitive ability is largely hereditary. So if I take your DNA, I will be able to tell whether you belong to the group of thinkers or not, or whether you've got a deficiency in terms of cognitive capacity or not. So it's all that. I totally agree with you. Artificial intelligence can be a substitute for high cognitive ability thinking that is required in future jobs. But also remember, one of the top skills, according to the World Economic Forum, is critical thinking. All the studies that are being done are talking about critical thinking. The beauty about critical thinking is that it can be learned, it can be taught, it can be developed. Look at countries like South Korea, look at countries like Japan, look at countries like Singapore. Those countries have got critical thinking being taught from preschool, okay? But in Africa, we start talking about critical thinking when someone is already in university. The damage has already been done. Okay, so if you want to have the biggest impact on your human capital as a country, the best way is to deal with people below the age of 10, before they reach the age of 10. That's how you can have an impact. You have the right nutrition, the right mental health, the right games, the right training, the right books for them. If you're a parent, the best investment that you can give your kid is to pay attention before they reach the age of 10.
Perfect, perfect. Memory, I think you'll have to come and join us again very soon. What I'm seeing from chat is people are saying, can we have memory back at some time soon? We will be able to, I hope we can be able to invite you soon to share more with us. And at least you'll be able to share your LinkedIn profile. We encourage everyone, check out what Memory is posting on his page, share with his thoughts. And I'm just saying something. We have one question, time for one question, Memory, and then we can close it. I think it's there's a question of, I don't know whether this is a question or it's a statement, but it's about which way would be the way forward, whether it's public sector, private sector, or consultancy. But I think that we will be experiencing a lot of change. Everything for us is turned upside down. I think Memory on a given day, if things were okay, you would be maybe in a classroom setting talking to people. And so things will have to adjust as we will have to adjust and think of new things as we come up, as we move on.
Yeah,
So Memory, I'd like to thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Fortune, the CEO of IPM Zimbabwe, who introduced us to Memory. We're very grateful. And hopefully, Memory, we can have you very soon again. And we would like to thank everyone who is with us. Tomorrow's session will also be running at the same time, and you can use the same link that you used to join today's session to join tomorrow's link. We'll still be, however, sending the link again in the evening, together with whatever articles and items Memory will be sending so that we can pass them over to you. We'd like to finish this session, and our apologies for the 6 minutes that we've run over time. And thank you very much for all the participants from Kenya, from Zimbabwe, from Zambia, from Uganda, from Nigeria, and from every part that joined us today. Thank you very much, and see you guys tomorrow. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you very
It was a
much,
pleasure.
Memory.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.